Welcome to the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you for hanging out with us today. Listen, today is so important to me. I even wore a collared shirt. One of our sound guy, Greco, who runs the sound for this thing, he said earlier, he was like, "Oh, you got your collared shirt on today." I'm like, man, absolutely, because we're talking about some serious stuff today. Listen, today I want to talk about one thing that it kind of came out of nowhere a couple of weeks ago. I was doing this interview. You know, I was promoted to lead pastor at our church, and I get a call from this guy with this. It's a website and kind of a newspaper called the Christian Index. And this guy calls me. He says, "Hey, I would love to do a story, if you don't mind, on you and the progression and the church and all this stuff." And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so we sit down, and he comes down to Tifton, Georgia, and he talks, and we just kind of, walk through the last 10 years here at the church. And then he kind of asked me questions about my life and coming to faith in Jesus and ministry and success and the fact that I own a gym and I also do business stuff. And he was like, he said, "TJ, I want to say something to you." And this is after the article came out. He sends me this screenshot, and he said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like, this is the number one trending article on our website and blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Man, listen, thank God, it's all glory to God." I was like, I'm a moron, but somehow God chooses to accomplish cool things with my life. And, but then he said this, he said, "TJ, I just want to say, I think this article, especially for ministers, is going to be very encouraging because you stayed." And he said, "I just want to thank you as an older guy. I want to thank you for staying." And that's the first time that I've heard someone say something like this. Obviously, with my skill set and my giftings, I've had offers and get offers throughout the year, and years of, other church or another organization would want me to be a part of it. And I stayed. And now the reason I stayed is because I believe that God genuinely called me to this city and to this church and to this team to lead them and to love them well. And so there was never a pull for me to ever go somewhere else. But what I realized in that, I started thinking about and just going over my mind, like, why did I stay? And some of the reasons that we're successful is in the staying, not just me, but other people. And what I realized in that one statement, like you can really thank Raj is what we'll call him, I guess. We can thank him for this podcast, because that one line got my brain just really churning and thinking on staying power. Like, what does it mean and what does it look like to stay somewhere, to invest yourself long enough to see a return? We live in a world where we're on to the next thing so quickly, so often. Like, we got to go to the next thing or the next job or the next relationship or the next dream or whatever it is. And I wonder if sometimes we don't reach those goals because we just didn't stay. And so today what I want to talk about is consistency, something that was brought to light through that conversation with him. And what I've been evaluating leading up to delivering this information to you today is that consistency takes, to grow, to stay, to be consistent. The growth in the staying is not always glamorous, but it's definitely incremental. Like, you will never grow unless you're consistent in the small incremental steps that it takes to get from here to wherever there is, right? So if it's, and we're going to talk about a few of these things, but if it's in an organization and people aren't following you fast enough, so you jump to another organization. Well, you didn't spend the time to get to know people, and you weren't consistent in your day-to-day interactions, building a team, building influence, building value, adding value to other people's lives. And so that consistency, the mundane things, you didn't build that foundation in consistency to set you up to build something that could be successful on top of it. There are so many enemies of consistency that fight against us in our life, but I believe it's this one thing. Like, this is the hinge on which the door of success often turns, and it's consistency. Like, it's not glamorous. The getting up and early and coming to work every day and doing the grind, if you will, the calendaring and the staff meetings and all of those things. Like, some of those things aren't the most exciting things. They're not glamorous, but it's those little consistent things that build the foundation that set us up for success. Well, in our lives, I'm convinced there's a few things, and we could literally list 100 different things, but I'm going to give you 3 or 4, maybe 5. But definitely 4 things that will be enemies of your consistency. And the first one is this. It's really, really simple. We treat the day-to-day as negligible. Like, we treat the day-to-day activities in our lives as if they're not consequential. And so, we look at the end goal. I want to lose 50 pounds, but I'm not considering every meal, right? I'm not considering what I eat every day. I want to be able to run a 5K, but I'm not thinking about, I can see the goal, I know the dream, I know where I want to go, but am I considering the day-to-day, the little incremental steps that I'm going to take every day that's going to get me to that ultimate goal? We treat the day-to-day as if it doesn't matter. Like, our discipline and our consistency wanes from day to day, and then we wonder why we don't reach our weight goal, or why we can't run the 5K, sub 25 minutes, or why our muscles aren't growing. Even though we go to the gym, 3 or 4 days a week, we might not be checking our diet or doing any cardio or whatever it is, right? Like, there's so many times, so often, that goals and dreams are never achieved because we give up on the day-to-day, that day-to-day consistency that lays the foundation to build to success in the dream. So I would say this, like, make sure that the day-to-day has not been devalued in your life. If you're like, okay, TJ, how can I make sure that I'm going to win, or at least set myself and my team up? Well, make sure that you focus on the day-to-day. Think about what you're doing from day to day, from week to week, from month to month. Like, that may be reorienting your staff meetings. That may be, starting to journal, right? That's one way to really track your day to day, where you're at, what you're thinking, what your headspace is. Maybe you're wanting more rest, and that's a goal for this year. Are you tracking your hours? Are you being intentional with how much, that work-life balance? Make sure that the day-to-day is not forsaken and that it's not devalued. Put an emphasis on consistency and discipline in the day-to-day. The next thing I would say is evaluate the processes more than you evaluate the results. Okay, so maybe think of it this way. Oftentimes we want to look at the results, right? We want to, we see this person who's a bodybuilder, or we see this organization. Take a church, for example, us here at First Baptist Tifton. It's very easy for us to look at someone else's end goal or someone else's success. Someone has this incredible onboarding process for their church, and their celebration day, they have 50 people on stage with t-shirts and banners, and it's this huge celebration. It's very easy to get wrapped up in the results and to evaluate the results and to be infatuated with the results without truly evaluating the process. Listen, the money's made, right? The souls are won, if you want to say it that way. I mean, obviously God's sovereign, He does the saving, but the success is made in the process, not in the results. The results that you're looking at in other people's lives, those results are the effect of a day-to-day process that they or their team have employed. There's a few guys in my gym who, when I look in on their lives, I think, oh my gosh, these dudes are incredible, man. Like, they run incredible, they work out, they can lift great, their gymnastics are next level. Like, these guys are stellar. Well, if I were to look at the results and immediately jump to their results, like if I were to immediately put 350 on a bench press, or I was immediately going to try to run a 1650 5K, if I went out with that, like I saw them do it on Monday, I'm going to do it on Tuesday. Well, listen, by the end of the day, Tuesday, I'm defeated, I'm discouraged, I'm brokenhearted, and I'm probably not going to attempt that again. Why? Because I was infatuated with the results. Look at another church. You print T-shirts, you make the banners, and you only have 1 or 2 new people join your church in the month or jump on your team in a 3-month period, and you're automatically discouraged. Well, It's because you didn't consider the year that it took to build the process, to get the people in place, to organize the volunteers, right? We get caught up in evaluating other people's results rather than submitting to the consistent, mundane, day-to-day processes. Another thing, or I guess probably the third thing for me that I've seen, and this one annoys me, like just full transparency, this one drives me crazy. And I think it's because my dad, when I was growing up, my dad, like his phrase to me often was like, TJ, stop making excuses. Don't make excuses. Don't blame what you're going through on somebody else. Like you need to take some ownership. And so the third one is we blame theoretical parties as the ones responsible for the growth or success that we see in other people. And when we do that, we excuse the hard work on our own. I'm going to give you a few examples. You know this if you've been listening for a while, but I own a CrossFit gym here in town with my buddy Gavin. And at CrossFit, we keep score every day. There's, the whiteboard is cleaned and the workouts put up, and there's scores, logged into the system. And I've heard guys and girls so many times when they see someone else has a better score than them, their immediate default is, oh, well, so-and-so cheated. Their immediate default. Now, listen, they might not have been in the class. They might not have watched this person work out. They might not even know who this person is, but their immediate default is they cheated. And now this is what's crazy. There have been classes that I have coached, and I've counted reps. I've counted reps for people. I've no-repped people. And that person that I was intentional to watch and help them with form and keep up with their score, they won. And that day at some point, I heard someone say they cheated. Well, I'm able to say, well, no, you're absolutely wrong because I counted their reps. Well, winning, oftentimes if someone wins, it's because they put in the hard work, the determination, and they were consistent to work at that skill. Don't be that person that when you see someone else winning, you automatically assume, oh, well, it's because they cheated. It's because they have some advantage that is inaccessible to me. Another one I hear all the time, being in the gym world, is with muscles. The guys and girls will look at each other's muscles, and I hear people say this all the time behind each other's back. Oh, they're on roids. Like they're taking steroids. And I'm like, I don't think they are. I just think they're here 6 days a week, and they count their macros and they do what they're supposed to do, and they're really intentional about taking creatine and their protein. And I think you're just jealous. That's what I've said that before, and even I want to say that sometimes because their immediate response is not, you know what? I only come 3 days a week, and I don't eat right. And that might be the problem. Instead of saying that, the reason they don't have that same, muscle tone or body mass index is because that person's on roids. They're blaming this theoretical party, or giving this third party, this other person in their life, this theoretical reason, like, oh, I think this is probably why. You see it all the time. Somebody gets promoted at their job. It's not just in the gym. Somebody gets promoted, and it's like, oh, well, that guy was just spending all of his time sucking up to the CEO. Like they were spending all their time, like just kissing their butt or whatever it is. Like they're spending all this time, like not actually doing the job and getting after it, but they're just spending all this time, like doing whatever. They just been a gopher and doing whatever the CEO says or whatever. We blame it not on other people's hard work. How crazy would it be if someone got promoted and you were like, oh my gosh, they deserved it because they are the hardest worker I know, and didn't say it to the person, but like said that behind somebody's back. Like, oh my gosh, they're amazing at their job and they work really hard, and they like, of course they deserve this promotion. Well, our insecurities, oftentimes, those that struggle with insecurity, which is every person on the planet that has ever been born, has some insecurity somewhere. Your insecurity would rather convince you that it's a flaw in the person rather than a flaw in you to why they've gotten ahead or they've achieved success. So we want to, say they've taken roids or they've cheated or they're a butt kisser or whatever you want to say. And then ultimately we even look at wealth. And I have a friend of mine, a great friend of mine. Every time we see someone driving a really, really nice vehicle that may be younger, 18 to 25 years old, their immediate response, and I'm not saying it's wrong all the time, but their immediate response is this: look at daddy's money driving by. That's daddy's money. Oh, daddy's money. And I'm like, but I don't know if man, if that guy went to trade school at 18 and spent 2 years learning welding, he could be making $80 an hour right now as a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old, and that F-250 may actually be his that he worked really hard for. That's the kind of stuff that goes through my brain, y'all. Like, that's why I get so frustrated with other people blaming other things rather than maybe assuming that person is a really hard worker and they've been really consistent. And so I think that has given way to, and this is what I'll call it. I've never heard this before, but I'm just going to throw this out there. I think sometimes we either get caught up evaluating the results more than the process. We treat the day-to-day as negligible. We blame other parties. We do all of those things because we're living in, and this is what I'll say, or living with, not just in, but living with a scratch-off mentality. You say, TJ, what's a scratch-off? Well, like you go to the corner store and you get a little scratch-off. It's $1, it's $5, $20, whatever. If you big ball, and you might buy like a whole roll of $30 scratch-offs. Listen, and we laugh about that. Like, even me, I kind of chuckle when I think about that. But the reality is Americans spend over $80 billion a year on the lottery, right? The average household spends, on the low end, $654 a year just on like scratchers, okay? And the success rate, like if you were to look up like Lindy DU's website, the statistics is that only 1 in 5, it's actually 19.39%, but basically 1 in 5 people win. And so, you see these headlines. You walk into a convenience store and there's this highlight reel up above you like, oh, this person won 40,000, this person won 50,000. And they don't tell you about the other 50,000 people that bought $1 scratchers that won nothing. And so we have developed, I think, in America and even in leadership a lot, this scratch-off mentality that we want a quick ride to the top. We want a quick fix, right? Like I said it earlier in the 30-day that 30-day beach body mentality. It's like, no, I don't want to work for 6 months to get a beach body. I'm going to Google how to get abs in 30 days. Like, I want instant gratification and an instant return. Listen, if you don't hear anything else that I say today, is that promotions, winning, muscles, wealth, most of those things were built. All of those things. I'll say this. There may be generational wealth that someone adopted or someone was given or gifted or inherited, but somewhere in that line, there was somebody that was consistent and worked incredibly hard from day to day to build something worth having. We can't always blame the winning and the muscles and the promotions and the wealth on something that someone else didn't have control over. There are people who grind every single day, right? Every day. And that's why they're successful. So you say, TJ, what in the world am I supposed to do then? Don't grow weary. Galatians 6:9. You guys know, I'm going to give you some Bible at some point while we're talking, but Galatians 6:9 says, don't grow weary in well-doing, for in due time you will reap if you do not faint. Like don't grow weary being consistent. If you're focused on the right thing, if you're going in the right direction, don't become discouraged. Don't grow weary in that, but just stay. I love this, and I guess I can say it this way: just stay faithful, stay consistent. I heard this guy, he was giving a talk on leadership, and he had the philosophy, I can't remember his name right now, but he had the philosophy of just one more day. And he said, he was talking to his dad, who was a recovered alcoholic and who had not been consuming alcohol for some years and still, anchored into sobriety. And he was recounting this conversation with his dad when his dad was kind of in the middle of the beginning of his recovery. And he said, Dad, are you going to stay sober the rest of your life? And his dad said, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I know for sure I'm going to stay sober for one more day. And he's like, no, Dad, but what I mean is, like, are you going to be sober like forever? Is your goal to be sober forever? He said, son, listen, my goal right now is to stay sober one more day, because I did it today and I really think I have one more day in me. And the guy's telling the story. He said several years later, his dad was still sober and he was really struggling in business. The guy telling the story is wanting to give up. He's wanting to quit on his dream. And I believe he's a real estate mogul, multimillionaire real estate mogul. And he says, man, I just want to quit, Dad. And his dad says this, and he remembers the conversation when his dad says it. He says, hey, son, why don't you just give it one more day. I'm not telling you to give it another week or another month or another 5 years of your life, but you really care about this dream and this vision. So how about just give it one more day? In the middle of the struggle, someone said what his dad was really saying is, hey, just be consistent for a little while longer. Like, just stay faithful and stay consistent. Like, do this one more day. Like, don't give up, don't quit, one more day. So my encouragement to you today, if you want to turn that corner, if you want to begin to see more wins in your life, you want to see more growth, you want to see more wealth, you want to see more consistent leadership, just stay. Be faithful. Commit to one more day and commit to the process. Know that this is going to be incremental. I said this earlier, but growth is not glamorous. It's incremental. I think about it like this. When Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel, people look at it now and you say, oh my God, this is this incredibly beautiful work of art. People just literally, it's breathtaking. People stand. I love to look at it. I like art, and I've always been mesmerized by how someone can put the picture from their mind onto a mat or onto a wall or a canvas or a ceiling, and so. When you think about that, it's easy to stand at the bottom and say, oh my God, he's an incredible artist. But you don't see that there are 343 different images collected in the artwork and that it took him 5 years. 5 years of laying on his back painting. And it took one brushstroke at a time. Like it wasn't like, like my walls when I was a teenager, I used to get Rolling Stone magazines and I tore all my favorite bands out, and I had all, to my grandparents' shame, I had my entire wall covered with like Pastor Troy and T.I. and only thing back like Eminem and all like Kid Rock. It was disgusting. But my wall was covered with all of these people. But this dude laid on his back for years with one brushstroke at a time, being consistent in the mundane and the day-to-day. And now, check this out. I'm going to gift this to you. Ready? Because he was willing to do that, there are generations of artists that have been inspired to give it one more brushstroke, right? To give it one more day. And so we can't get caught up in the finished product. Growth is not glamorous. It's instrumental. It's in the day-to-day. And don't be distracted. This is something that, for me, that has been difficult many times in my life. Don't get distracted by someone else's timing, by someone else, the timing of someone else's success, or the size of their success, or the visibility of it. Take your eyes off of everyone else's highlight reels that you've been looking at and put them on your work. And let God work in you, and you work as hard as you can at your task, at your dream, at your purpose, at your vision, and watch what consistency can do. Watch what staying faithful to your goal can do. Give it another day, right? Just give it one more day. Wake up tomorrow and say, you know what? I'm going to give this task everything that I have. And listen, I promise you, consistency will win. Time and time again. You will see growth in your life. You will see success. You will see wins begin to stack up. If you cannot grow weary in well-doing, but stay faithful, be consistent, and don't give up. Don't just jump for the quick fix. Don't just, buy 50,000 $1 scratchers trying to win 50,000 when you could have been just chipping away every day, putting that $1 in the bank and building that success. All right? Y'all stay consistent, stay faithful. Thanks for hanging out with me. See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel. If you enjoyed this episode, share with a friend. For more content, follow us on Instagram and YouTube. If you have any questions you would like to ask TJ, whether it is about life, leadership, or the gospel, you can email those to tjmaldenleadershippodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you join us again on the TJ Malden Leadership Podcast.